Today's video is inspired by a big incident that happened in one of the women's professional tennis matches in Hungary, Budapest, in 17th to 23rd of July week, the tournament. So what happened was there was a big argument, and to cut a long story short, the player who had the ball called out on her, who then challenged it and everything, and didn't get the call overturned, it still got ruled against her, is she ended up just playing one more point afterwards, funnily enough that she won, okay, and then she started crying and she quit the match and didn't play on, So this is all about that. I'm not going to go into who the players are because it's not about that. To me, what happens is when all these things happen, there's two main questions to have a look at. One is, what really happened? What's the full scenario? So you need to see the context of it. Is the actual point being played, what happened afterwards, and all this type of thing. And number two is that to look at it, or there's three really. Two is to look at how can we improve this situation so that such incidents don't keep happening all the time. And number three, which is a little bit tied in with number two, is have the concept that, hey, what would be in the best interest of tennis as you're thinking about how these situations should get handled. So that's how I think of these things. Okay, so for me, I feel that all of the three people involved, which would be the main three people involved, would be the player who got the call in their favor, where the side the ball got hit to, the person who hit the ball and challenged the ball and lost the point and got confirmed, the chair umpire confirmed that the lines people corrected it's out, okay, her, and of course also the chair umpire. So let's first go with the chair umpire, because for me I always feel that the biggest onus in the sport is about the people who run it, okay, and the officiating of the matches, because they are in control and they can set the rules. The players just have to follow with that. So the biggest one here, I feel, is there. So what happened in the scenario is, even though in the media, okay, like I always say, if you just believe what the media says, then you're going to have a really sad and uneventful life of fruitfulness. No fruit for you, okay? So what happens is the media report the player who won the point, okay, is that she's now the most hated woman in tennis, okay? This is the whole scenario that come out, which is really far from being fair. All right, and let me, before everyone dies and shoots me, is clarify this, so what actually happened in full, even though instead of these parts and bits and pieces that got reported in the media, is that the ball was hit, okay, from this player out, and the lines people said out. So she really thought that was a bad call, so she immediately came up and stood at the net and hung on the net and asked the chair umpire to go down and check the mark, because the tournament was held on clay, so when the ball hits the floor, a mark is left, all right? So she asked the chair umpire to go down. The chair umpire come down, looks at the ball from really close up and signifies directly to the player who's only a few meters away, because the ball bounced just somewhere around the service box area, so not right towards the back, towards the front, that the ball is out, the call is correct. And of course, this player was really unhappy and was in disbelief. How can you say that that's out? Okay, and then the chair umpire, of course, goes back, and the player here keeps arguing, and the chair umpire calls the score. So what happens in tennis is once the call is the score is called, the change can never happen anymore. It's already done. The score is done. Even if you call out the tournament referee now, the referee will not be able to change anything that happened. They can only watch from there on in. So there's no point for the referee to come out because the point's over. So the chair umpire is telling the player, it's now 15:30, play. I think she might have said it 2 or 3 times, at least twice, for her to play. But this player kept arguing here. And now in terms of the onus of the sport is that the chair umpire needs to be a bit more active in terms of once the score is called and she's asked the player to play and she's just arguing, it's not good for people who are watching at the game. It's not good for people who are watching on the TV. Even in the commentary, they're saying this is getting very monotonous, because the player who was arguing once the call was already checked out by the chair umpire, made the final call, the score, is still arguing for a really long time. I don't remember exactly, I didn't take note of it, but I can guarantee you it's at least 2 minutes, when between points it's only supposed to be 25 seconds. So then once the chair umpire has asked her to play and said the score, she should say, I'm sorry, but unless you play, I'm going to have to give you a code violation. All right? So that this hanging at the net and big arguing doesn't happen. And then, of course, the box and the coach and her friends or whoever were in the box were getting into it and commenting. And, I can't say for sure, but it seemed a lot like they were, bad-mouthing the whole organization of the WTA. And it definitely seemed as though they were verbally abusing the player who got the favor of the call as well. All right, so these are all going to be stopped, and that could have happened if the player gave the warning to do that. Even somebody from the crowd yelled out time violation, and the player did at the net was a bit like, here, but hey, but I got so badly done by. So that, and the second part is, why not when it's available in every other sport and a lot of the other tournaments not on clay? Why to clarify this and try to make it over much faster? Because this arguing and abusing of everybody and stuff going on and not playing, and of course having someone cry and give up the match 1 point later, is not what we want for the tennis outcome, not for the fans, not for anybody. The big incident is, why not, can we just say, instead of saying I want the referee and no, you're totally wrong, that's wrong, my ball is in, and how can you say that's out and all this stuff, is just say, okay, if then the person doesn't satisfied with the chair umpire coming down and looking at the mark, is that we just go to the digital replay, and then quickly the digital replay can come up. If the digital replay is showing either that the ball actually was in, or the umpire coming down from the chair is correct and it's out, it can be done and resolved, and everyone has peace of mind. So I really don't see why we can't do that when it happens in lots of other tournaments. Why not have it in clay also? All right, and of course in doing this. Now, in terms of the player who won the point and got the very rough end of the stick in the media, is that number one is that when this player, because what happened is after this happened, okay, and eventually the player who got the call against her served the next ball and they played another point. She won that point actually, and it became 30-all because that one became 15-30. So that sort of erased in the scoreboard all that happened. But in this player's mind, they couldn't deal with it, even though they won that point, and they started coming up and complaining again about how could that call have been that. Is that the other player was annoyed now for waiting for so long and all this type of stuff, and this player again going on about this thing that's well and truly over, is she walked up to it and this player started yelling at her as if she's, the boss or some, in an aggressive way, that don't rub it out. What are you doing? Don't rub it out. Leave it there. But that player rubbed it out because it's all done, it's finished and whatever. She rubbed out the mark so it couldn't be seen anymore. And the player here was still going and telling about how can she do that and all this sort of stuff. And then, she was so distressed that she was sitting down and crying, and then she just got up. Luckily, she shook the umpire's hand and her opponent's hand and quit the game. Okay, so number one is she should be able to rub it out because it's well after. But number two is that when she asked her, why do you do that and all this stuff, is the player there would be in her best interest is to not yell out back to her and argue, is just to be quiet. And number two is earlier on when that person had the mark checked, okay, and the umpire says it's out, the call stands, it's 15-30, is when this is continuing on for more than a little bit, that player should come out and say, hey, are we going to keep playing? Is this going to be a time violation? And if the chair umpire then wasn't provoked into giving the warning that, hey, I'm going to have to do a time violation unless you start playing again, is then to ask, well, I want to call the referee because we should keep playing. You've said the score, you've made the ruling, you got down from the chair, all this type of things. That would be the only real things that you could do. But overall, everybody's going to have a part to when there's an argument, it's never only one person's fault. The sad thing's how players came out on social media and said, hey, when I see that woman, whatever, who rubbed out the mark, I'm going to diss and her and tell her what I think of her and all this stuff, and getting all this heat about whatever, is know that that's actually one of the things that you should do when you're playing, is if you feel that there's bad line calls or you don't want to be on the wrong end of the stick of a line call when you're playing clay, you do what Nadal's doing a lot of the times, and you don't hear anyone saying Nadal's the most hated man in sport, is when somebody serves it very near the line on clay or somebody hits it very near one of the lines at the baseline or the sideline, and the point is over, of course. The main point is to do what the player did at the tournament who got the favour of the call, is to wait till the umpire has checked it and called the score, and then it's all gone. So then it's actually a good idea to clear, because then the next time the ball bounces near one of these places, they're not going to get confused, because it's a little bit of a tricky thing. Why I'm saying is when you've got that final digital replay that you can go to, is that it's important because you have to also pay attention. Some of the chair umpires sometimes, not going to say anything about anyone or whatever, but just saying is when they see a ball land, okay, and a player goes to dispute it, then a lot of them, because they're not so low to the ground, these chairs, they're fairly elevated so they can get a good view of the court, it's quite hard for them. They have to be very concentrated. When they're getting down the chair, they have to sort of be prepared to fall down. Because if they really want to be accurate, because the main problem that can happen is that where they see the ball, and then when they do this to climb down and not fall, and then they re-look up, they can actually lose the spot where the ball really was that they saw, and they might go up and see a different one. So this is a bit of a trick, is when they're coming down the chair, okay? But that means, like I said, if you clear away marks after there's no dispute and a call's being called, it's actually good to do this here. So this is my 2 cents worth. Is I'm looking at, it's not about, like you can see, I'm not talking about anything to do with who these players were or what country they're from or any type of stuff like this. I'm just wanting to be that what's in the best interest of tennis. This type of things don't happen. What can we do about it? How can we improve? So I've given you a number of things there. How you can best not fuel the situation. And hopefully you can also do things where, the outside parties also don't get involved in a negative way as well. So these are all my comments on this. Well, I really like to know what you think about it, and especially if you saw it, and if you didn't realize this is all the things that actually happen, is that's one of the key things. You must go and see the whole point and really see what happens and understand the rules properly before you go calling people. I'm very sure that, the people who are professional players who insulted this player, who also pros themselves in public, I think it was mostly through Twitter, from what I could hear, is that I'm pretty sure they didn't see the whole thing. They only heard about stuff and they're going out and do that. Is you must always really check the whole scenario and the facts before you go making judgments. But it's not about the judgments, but how can we make the sport better and how can we learn from this? All right, leave me your comments. I really want to read them. Hopefully this generates a lot of discussion, and most importantly, hopefully we can get it better and changed in the sport from now on in. So this sort of ugly stuff doesn't happen because it's not ugly. Tennis is the most beautiful sport.